Everything. Debt is not the enemy. Poor strategy is. Most people see loans as chains, but the truth is everything. A loan can become the bridge that moves you from surviving to thriving if you learn how to take control of it instead of letting it control you. In this audiobook, Everything, you're going to discover how to transform loans from something that drains your finances into something that expands your opportunities, accelerates your goals, and builds your future. Everything. The purpose here is simple: to help you borrow intelligently, pay strategically, and come out stronger, wealthier, and more confident than ever before. When most people think of debt, everything, they think of a weight pressing on their chest. They picture bills, due dates, interest charges, and sleepless nights. Everything. We're almost trained to respond to the word loan with the same emotional reaction we give to danger. But that instinct is built more from fear than facts. Everything, and fear has a way of clouding judgment. The truth is, debt itself is neutral. It does not come with a personality. Everything. It doesn't wake up every morning deciding whether to ruin your life or transform it. It simply responds to how you use it. And when you begin to see it this way, everything, the emotional intensity begins to soften, and suddenly the idea of borrowing no longer feels like walking into a storm without an umbrella. It becomes something you can understand, manage, everything, and even benefit from. I remember talking to a young man who avoided applying for a student loan because his parents always said, "Never owe anyone anything." Their fear became his everything, and because of that, he spent 4 extra years working low-wage jobs trying to save enough money just to enter university. Meanwhile, his friends graduated, secured better jobs, everything, and moved forward. He avoided debt, yes, but he also avoided opportunity. When he finally gathered enough money, he told me, almost defeated, "Everything, I wasted so much time because I was scared to owe." That sentence stayed with me. Fear cost him years, not debt. This is the psychology of borrowing. What we fear, we avoid. Everything. What we avoid, we misunderstand. And what we misunderstand, we mishandle. Most financial mistakes around debt don't come from borrowing. They come from borrowing without knowledge. Everything. Fear blocks knowledge. Fear shuts down curiosity. Fear stops us from asking the right questions. And when we don't ask questions, we follow instincts instead of strategy. Everything. If fear is the emotional chain, clarity is the key. One powerful way to shift your mindset is to remember that almost every major advancement in life and society has involved borrowing. Businesses borrow, governments borrow, homeowners borrow, students borrow, entrepreneurs borrow. Everything. Even the most successful companies in the world are carrying billions in strategic debt right now, and they're using it as fuel to grow. They're not panicked about the number. Everything. They're focused on the return. Imagine getting a loan that costs you 5% but increases your income by 20 or 30%. That's not loss, that's leverage. Everything. But the average person is never taught this. Instead, we're taught to fear loans the way our grandparents feared risky storms. Everything. They lived in times when borrowing options were limited and interest systems were harsh. A loan could indeed ruin a life because information was scarce and financial tools were minimal. Everything. But today is not yesterday. Today, knowledge is accessible, options are diverse, terms are negotiable, and strategies are everywhere if we're willing to learn them. Now, everything. This doesn't mean taking loans lightly. It doesn't mean celebrating debt just because others do. It means shifting from emotional panic to informed decision-making. Everything. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine 2 people take out the same loan. One feels confident because they understand interest, repayment schedules, refinancing options, everything, and the reason they're borrowing. The other feels terrified and confused, so they avoid looking at statements, delay payments, and hope things sort themselves out. Same loan, everything. 2 completely different outcomes. Fear is the difference. When you understand how loans work, you become an active driver of your financial decisions. Everything. Not a passenger holding on tightly and hoping the road isn't too bumpy. Think about driving a car for the first time. At first, every movement feels dangerous. Everything. Every speed bump feels like a threat. But after a while, you understand the controls. You know what the brakes do, how the accelerator responds, and which direction the wheel turns. Everything. The car didn't become less powerful. You simply became more capable. The same is true with loans. The power isn't removed, the fear is. Let's take another relatable example. Everything. Think of someone renting a house their entire life because they're scared of taking a mortgage. They pay rent for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. Everything. Handing money to someone else's pocket. They avoid debt, but don't realize they're paying someone else's debt anyway. Meanwhile, another person takes a loan, everything, pays a similar monthly amount, and ends up owning something valuable. Again, the difference isn't debt, it's mindset. One sees debt as a trap. The other sees debt as a tool, everything. We need to talk about why fear feels so real. Part of it comes from stories we hear, friends drowning in credit card bills, families struggling to make payments, everything. People complaining about interest rates. These stories stick to our emotions, and we assume all loans end badly. But for every negative story, there are countless quiet success stories. Everything. The entrepreneur who borrowed to start a business and multiplied the return. The young professional who took a study loan, got a better job, and repaid everything within years. Everything. The family who bought a home, built equity, and created stability. It's just that positive stories don't sound dramatic enough to repeat. Fear spreads faster than reason. So, everything. How do you stop fearing debt? You start by asking better questions instead of asking, everything. What if I can't pay it back? Ask, how will I structure this so I can pay it comfortably? Instead of asking, everything. What if the interest is too high? Ask, is this interest fair based on what I gain from this loan? Instead of asking, everything. What if things go wrong? Ask, what will this help me achieve if things go right? Suddenly, your brain shifts from panic mode to planning mode. Everything. I once met a woman who took out a small loan to start a home baking business. She was terrified at first. The day she received the funds, she almost sent them back. Everything. Convinced she'd made a mistake. But she pushed through her fear and bought a small oven, ingredients, and packaging materials. Everything. Within 6 months, she was earning more from weekend baking than from her full-time job. She didn't borrow recklessly. She borrowed with intention. She said something beautiful, everything. The loan didn't change my life. My mindset did. This is the turning point. Debt is not a monster. It's simply money borrowed from the future. If the future looks stronger, safer, everything, and more profitable because of the loan, then the decision makes sense. If the future looks stressful and uncertain, maybe the timing isn't right. Everything. Understanding this balance doesn't eliminate risk, but it eliminates unnecessary fear. Sometimes fear is just a lack of clarity, and clarity comes from learning. Everything. When you know how interest works, how repayment schedules function, how to compare options, how to avoid hidden fees, how to negotiate terms, everything, and how to calculate real cost versus real gain, you stop feeling like debt is a dark tunnel and start realizing it's just another road. Some roads are rough, some are smooth, everything. Some are short, some are long, but all roads can be traveled safely when you know how to drive. It's important to ask yourself, what opportunities am I rejecting because of fear? Everything. What growth am I delaying? What dreams am I postponing unnecessarily? Many people spend their entire lives running from debt instead of running toward knowledge. Everything. When you understand something, it loses its power to intimidate you. Think of someone trying to learn how to swim while panicking about drowning. Their fear keeps them tense, everything, and tension makes swimming harder. The moment they relax, even a little, the water stops feeling threatening and starts feeling navigable. Debt works exactly the same way, everything. Now imagine yourself approaching borrowing with a calm, informed mind. You compare options, ask the right questions, analyze repayment plans, and borrow only what aligns with your goals. Everything. That's not fear. That's confidence. That's intelligence. That's using the system instead of being used by it. Many people assume financial freedom means never owing a cent. Everything. But financial freedom actually means understanding how money moves, how tools work, and how to position yourself wisely. Freedom is knowledge, not avoidance. You don't need to love debt. Everything. You don't even need to want it. You simply need to understand it well enough that if you choose to use it, you do so with strength, clarity, and purpose. Whenever fear rises, everything. Remind yourself that billions of people borrow every day, successfully. You are not stepping into unknown territory. You are stepping into territory millions have mastered. Everything. And you can learn what they learned. You can use what they used. You can build what they built. Slowly, the fear begins to fade, replaced by something much more powerful: respect. Everything. Respect for the tool, respect for the responsibility, respect for your goals, and most importantly, respect for yourself and your ability to learn, adapt, and grow. Everything. Borrowing is one of those decisions that tests a person's emotional stability more than their financial knowledge. When most people think about taking a loan, everything, they feel pressure in their chest before they even understand the numbers on paper. They imagine worst-case scenarios, mountains of debt, and sleepless nights. Everything. But imagine for a moment if the entire idea of borrowing shifted in your mind. If instead of thinking, "I have no choice," you could calmly say to yourself, "Everything. I know exactly why I'm borrowing, how much I need, and how this decision fits into the bigger picture of my life." That shift, right there, is everything. Everything. Borrowing without panic doesn't start with money. It starts with clarity. I want you to think about the last time you needed money urgently. Maybe something broke. Everything. Maybe an opportunity came up. Maybe you were behind on payments. Whatever it was, chances are the emotions came first. Fear, stress, embarrassment, and the decision followed. Everything. But emotional decisions are costly decisions. When you borrow because you're scared, you almost always borrow more than you need. You choose the fastest available option, everything, and you sign for terms that you barely understand. In other words, panic borrowing almost guarantees regret later. So let's start rewriting this pattern right now. Everything. The first question you must always ask yourself is not, "How do I get money?" but "Why do I need money?" These are not the same question. One is reactive, the other is strategic. Everything. Sometimes a loan is necessary. Sometimes it's a short-term problem asking for a long-term mistake, for example. Everything. A young man I once spoke to was considering taking out a personal loan because he felt stuck at his job. He wanted to start a side business, everything, and he thought a loan would quickly solve everything. But when we sat down and talked honestly, we discovered something: he didn't actually have a business plan. He just had frustration. Everything. Borrowing money for frustration is like adding weight to a ship that already feels heavy. It doesn't move you forward, it drags you deeper. Instead, everything. Imagine approaching borrowing like a business would. No company wakes up one morning and says, "We feel pressured, let's take a loan." They calculate, they forecast, everything. They make projections, they compare options, and they determine exactly how the borrowed money will convert into results. And that's what I want for you. Everything. Not to think like a desperate borrower, but like a strategic decision maker whose future deserves thoughtful planning. So pause, breathe, everything. And ask yourself the most important question you'll ever ask before borrowing: is this loan moving me forward, or is it just helping me survive another month? If the answer is survival, everything. Pause. You might still end up borrowing, but at least you're borrowing consciously, not automatically. And that awareness gives you power, because panic will make you rush everything, but clarity makes you choose. Once you understand your reason, the next step is to know what type of loan actually fits your goal. Everything. Too many people get trapped in the wrong type of loan simply because it was available. Personal loans, business loans, education loans, secured loans, payday loans, everything. Credit cards. Each one speaks a different financial language, but most people only hear one word: money. Let me give you a practical example. Everything. A woman I know borrowed through multiple credit cards because she wanted to pay her university fees. She didn't have enough guidance, so she followed the path that seemed easiest. Everything. Swipe a card, pay the fee, move on. But credit cards are one of the highest interest forms of borrowing. So what started as financial relief slowly turned into a heavy burden. Everything. She ended up paying double what her degree actually cost. She didn't need more money. She needed a different type of loan. Education loans usually have lower interest. Everything. Better repayment options and longer timelines. But without planning, we don't compare. We just react. Choosing the right loan is like choosing the right shoes for a long journey. Everything. If you pick based on what's closest instead of what actually fits, the road becomes painful very quickly. So take the time to learn the difference. Ask questions. Compare interest. Everything. Compare repayment terms. Ask what happens if you delay payment. Most people think lenders are doing them a favor, but in reality, lenders are running a business. Everything. You must ask the questions that protect you. A lender already knows their benefit. You must know yours. Now, many people worry that asking questions makes them look inexperienced or weak. Everything. But the opposite is true. Asking questions makes you appear serious, thoughtful, and confident. So here's a mindset shift. If a lender rushes you, that's a warning sign. Everything. The right lender will explain, clarify, and guide. The wrong lender will push, pressure, and distract you with urgency. And remember, urgency is the enemy of thoughtful borrowing. Everything. Once you've evaluated your options, the next crucial step is to figure out the exact amount you should borrow, not the amount you're offered. Everything. This is one of the most common mistakes borrowers make. A lender approves a large amount, And because it feels like a blessing, you accept it. Everything. But excess borrowing is like overeating. Just because more is available doesn't mean it's good for you. Borrow only what your plan requires, not what your emotions desire. Everything. Let's imagine you're starting a small online business. You calculate that you need money for equipment, maybe a website, maybe some advertising. That's the amount you borrow. Everything. But most people add just in case money on top of that. And that just in case category becomes debt that doesn't build anything. Everything. The dream suddenly becomes expensive because the plan wasn't specific. Borrowing with a plan forces you to define your goal clearly, and a clear goal protects your wallet. Everything. But here's something most people never discuss. Borrowing is not just about getting money. It's about deciding who you're becoming in the process. Everything. Are you becoming someone who chooses strategically or someone who reacts emotionally? You're training your financial identity every time you borrow. Thoughtful borrowing builds confidence. Everything. Emotional borrowing builds insecurity. Now, I want you to picture yourself walking into a loan office or applying online with complete emotional control. You've done your research. Everything. You know what you need, why you need it, and how you'll pay it back. You're not hoping for approval. You're evaluating whether this loan deserves you. Everything. That is the mindset of financial maturity, and that mindset changes everything. Here's another important truth. Sometimes the smartest financial decision is to delay the loan. Everything. That doesn't mean ignoring your problem. It means preparing your path. Maybe you need a few more months of savings. Maybe you need to clear a smaller debt first. Everything. Maybe you need to learn more about repayment strategies. There's strength in waiting when waiting protects your future. The world teaches us that speed equals success. But in borrowing, everything, patience equals protection. There will also be moments when borrowing is not only smart, it's necessary. You want to invest in your education, start a business, build something meaningful, everything, or take a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In those moments, borrowing becomes a tool of progress. But progress is never rushed. Progress is planned. So before signing anything, everything, before accepting money, ask yourself 3 simple questions. First, what problem is this loan solving? Second, what specific result will this loan help me achieve? And third, everything. Will this loan help me grow or just help me escape? Growth borrowing changes your life. Escape borrowing changes your stress level. There's a difference. Everything. Growth borrowing gives you more opportunities. Escape borrowing gives you temporary relief, and relief has a very short lifespan. Borrow deliberately, never emotionally. Everything. Borrow with a strategy, not with fear. Because when borrowing becomes a planned decision instead of a panicked reaction, something profound happens. You regain control. Everything. Your financial life stops feeling like a crisis and starts feeling like a future. And in that future, loans are no longer a source of anxiety. They become instruments of progress. Everything. Chosen carefully, managed confidently, and used purposefully. And all of this starts with a calm mind before it starts with a signed document. When most people think about paying back a loan, everything, they think about pressure, sacrifice, and cutting pieces out of their life just to send money somewhere else. But the truth is, repayment isn't simply about giving money away. Everything. It's about reclaiming ownership of your future, one deliberate payment at a time. Every payment you make isn't just reducing a balance. It's increasing your freedom. Everything. The mindset shift begins right there. Repayment isn't punishment, it's progress. When I decided to pay off my first significant loan, everything, I remember staring at the numbers with a heavy feeling. It felt impossible. I didn't know where to begin, and I certainly didn't feel in control. But I realized something quickly. Everything. The loan wasn't the real burden. My lack of a plan was. Once I created that system, everything felt lighter. Everything. The same balance suddenly felt manageable because my strategy made me the one steering the wheel. Everything. One of the biggest mistakes people make is simply paying whatever the lender tells them to pay without thinking. Minimum payments are convenient but dangerous. Everything. They stretch your loan over years, sometimes decades, and silently inflate the total amount you'll eventually pay. But here's the empowering part with the right strategy. Everything. You can flip that dynamic completely. Instead of time controlling you, you control time. Instead of interest growing in silence, you reduce it deliberately. Everything. You don't need to be wealthy to pay smarter. You simply need a plan. A useful starting point is creating a repayment timeline that reflects your real life, not a perfect fantasy. Everything. Some people try to attack a loan aggressively because motivation is high in the beginning, but motivation without realism eventually turns into stress, and stress leads to avoidance. Everything. Set a timeline that is challenging enough to keep you engaged, but realistic enough that you stay consistent. Consistency always wins over intensity. Momentum beats sudden bursts every time. Everything. There are two major philosophies of repayment that have helped millions: the snowball method and the avalanche method. They both work. Everything. But your emotional psychology determines which will work best for you. With the snowball method, you focus on paying off your smallest loan first while paying minimums on the rest. Everything. When the smallest debt disappears, you feel a psychological victory, a burst of momentum, and that motivation becomes fuel. Everything. You apply the money you were paying on that small loan onto the next one, and the snowball grows. Every month, the amount you can throw at your debt becomes bigger, faster, stronger. Everything. You literally build momentum with your own discipline. The avalanche method works differently. Instead of starting with the smallest loan, everything, you start with the one that has the highest interest rate. Mathematically, that saves you the most money long term. Emotionally, it can feel slow in the beginning. Everything. Because the highest interest debt is usually not the smallest. But once that high interest burden begins shrinking, your total payoff accelerates enormously. Everything. It's the smarter approach in pure numbers. But remember, money is emotional. If motivation is something you struggle with, everything, the snowball method might give you the emotional momentum you need to continue. Now, interest doesn't have to be something you simply accept. Everything. You can negotiate interest with lenders more often than you think. People assume that interest rates are fixed like laws of nature. Everything. But lenders would rather keep you paying than risk losing your ability to pay at all. If you've been making consistent payments, if your credit improves, everything, or if market interest rates have gone down since you borrowed, you're in a position to negotiate. Everything. A simple phone call where you explain that you're committed to repaying but would like a lower rate can lead to unexpected results. Everything, even a slight reduction in interest, can save you thousands over time. Another practical tool is refinancing or consolidating debt. This can be a powerful strategy, but only if applied wisely. Everything. Refinancing means replacing one loan with another loan that has better terms, usually a lower rate. Consolidation combines multiple loans into one. Everything, reducing complexity and often lowering total interest. But remember, refinancing only works if the new loan costs less overall. Everything. Some lenders tempt you with lower monthly payments, but stretch your timeline so far that you end up paying more over time. Always compare total cost, not just monthly cost. Everything. Freedom is measured in total repayment, not smaller installments that last forever. But systems aren't only financial, they're behavioral. Everything. I once coached someone who paid $3 extra toward her debt every single day, automatically. $3. Just the price of a small snack. She barely felt it, but over time, everything. Those small daily payments shaved months off her timeline. She built a habit that was nearly invisible day to day but incredibly powerful over time. The lesson is simple. Everything. Small extra payments, done consistently, can change everything. You might think small payments don't matter, but interest compounds against you, which means extra payments compound for you. Everything, even paying half the cost of a coffee toward your loan every day, makes a real impact. When debt shrinks by even a small percentage each month instead of growing, everything, you psychologically shift from feeling attacked to feeling in control. You begin to win. I remember talking to someone who felt completely buried in credit card debt. Everything. He was paying the minimum every month, watching the balance barely move, and feeling frustrated and stuck. The interest alone was swallowing half of what he paid. Everything. When he switched to a targeted repayment plan and added even a tiny extra payment every week, suddenly that balance began to fall. It wasn't fast at first, but progress is addictive. Everything. Soon he added a little more. Then a little more. 1 year later, he had eliminated nearly half his total debt. Not because he magically earned more money, everything, but because he changed direction from drifting to driving. Another powerful mindset shift is seeing repayment as part of building wealth, not drowning in debt. Everything. When you pay extra toward principal, you are literally buying back pieces of your future income that would have gone to interest. That is an investment. It's invisible, but extremely real. Everything. Every dollar you eliminate today becomes freedom tomorrow. One of the most motivating things you can do is track your progress visually. Some people use charts, some create spreadsheets. Everything. Some simply write down the new balance every month. When you can see the number falling, you feel powerful. When progress becomes visible, discipline becomes easier. Everything. And don't underestimate the importance of celebrating small financial victories. Maybe you paid $20 extra this week. Celebrate it. Everything. Maybe you negotiated a tiny reduction in interest. Celebrate it. Celebration reinforces behavior, and reinforced behavior becomes habit. Sometimes, everything. People fear repayment because they feel like the money is gone forever. But what if repayment wasn't something you suffered through, but something you used to learn discipline? Everything. Every payment strengthens your ability to manage finances. Every sacrifice builds resilience. Debt repayment, when done consciously, is a training ground for future success. Everything. You're not just eliminating what you owe. You are developing skills that stay with you for life. Everything. I once knew a man who said paying off his debt was the first time in his adult life he proved to himself that he could finish something. He had started businesses and abandoned them. Everything. Started goals and quit halfway. But repayment was something he finished entirely through discipline and patience. When the final payment cleared, yes, everything. The debt was gone. But so was a deeper doubt about himself. He believed he could finish what he started. That confidence changed his life in ways far beyond money. There is a quiet, everything, powerful truth inside every repayment journey. You learn patience. You learn commitment. You learn delayed gratification. You learn that progress doesn't always look dramatic. Everything. But inch by inch it moves you. And one day you look back and realize your life has changed not because of one big decision, but because of many small consistent ones. Everything. Repayment isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of discipline. And discipline is the foundation of freedom. You're not simply paying back what you owe. Everything. You are building a future where loans work in your favor because you have learned to take control instead of drifting. Every payment, every negotiation, everything. Every extra dollar becomes proof that you are moving forward. Even slow progress is powerful when you are moving in the right direction. Everything. There is a moment in almost every person's financial journey when they feel trapped by what they owe, convinced that loans exist only to keep them stuck in the same place. Everything. But what I want you to consider right now is a very different perspective. What if a loan could be more than a lifeline during a difficult moment? Everything. What if it could be the foundation of something new, something bigger, something that shifts the entire direction of your life? The truth is, loans are not created only for emergencies. Everything. They can be purposeful tools, strategic instruments capable of building a skill set, launching a business, investing in a better career. Everything. Or opening a door you could never have pushed open without a bit of leverage. When we are children, we are taught to fear debt as if it's a monster in the dark. Everything. But every major city you've ever visited, every global company you admire, every university you've heard about, nearly every innovation you touch, everything, has been powered by someone using borrowed money with intention. Entire skyscrapers rise because of loans. New businesses take flight because of funding. Everything. Students transition into high-earning careers because someone believed that investing borrowed money into education could produce better results in the future. Everything. What separates people who stay stuck and people who progress is not whether they borrowed money, but why they borrowed it and what they did with it afterward. Everything. Imagine two different individuals. One uses a loan to cover random expenses and ends up paying interest without actually changing their long-term financial direction. Everything. The other uses a similar-sized loan to take a certification course that helps them double their income. Same amount of debt, two completely different outcomes. When we borrow for survival, everything. Debt becomes a weight. When we borrow for growth, debt becomes leverage. And leverage is one of the greatest forces in wealth building. Everything. Think about a young graphic designer who dreams of upgrading their skills with professional training. Everything. They could spend years waiting until they save enough. Or they could take a carefully chosen loan that grants them immediate access to the knowledge that doubles their earning power now rather than later. Everything. By the time someone who waited finally saves enough, the person who borrowed has already increased their rates, already built their portfolio, already grown their opportunities. Everything. There is a cost in waiting, and that cost is missed time. Loans shorten the time between where you are and where you could be if you use them wisely. Consider another scenario. Everything. A small business owner selling handmade products from home. They're limited by their equipment and time. With no investment, growth happens slowly, often painfully slowly. Everything. But imagine this person takes a strategic business loan, nothing reckless, just enough to buy better tools, packaging, a marketing plan, maybe a small workspace, everything. Suddenly production doubles, sales follow, and the business finally becomes something sustainable. The loan wasn't a burden, it was fuel, everything. And fuel is exactly what many dreams require in order to take shape. Of course, this doesn't mean borrowing blindly. The loan you take for growth should be backed by a plan, a purpose, everything, and a vision of returns. Borrowing for the sake of buying more expensive clothes, or gadgets, or fleeting comforts is survival borrowing. But borrowing to elevate your skills, everything, grow a business or invest in your earning potential is progress borrowing. It leads somewhere, it compounds, it changes your long-term trajectory. Now let's talk about the emotional part, everything, because money decisions are rarely purely logical. Many people avoid investing in themselves because they fear failure. They fear the question, what if it doesn't work? Everything. But there is another question just as important, what if it does? What if the course you take unlocks a new profession? What if the tool you buy enables a new business? Everything. What if the degree you pursue leads to a far better career? Every person who ever achieved something meaningful had to invest in themselves in some form. Everything. Whether with their own savings or borrowed funds, and more often than not, borrowed funds sped things up. Sometimes everything. The bravest thing you can do for your future self is to take a calculated risk. Not a reckless one, not an emotional one, but a purposeful one built on intention and intelligent planning. Everything. If someone told you that investing a small amount of money today could expand your income for the next 10 or 20 years, everything, would you really refuse simply because the money wasn't originally yours? That's exactly how you should evaluate growth-focused loans, not as expenses, everything, but as seeds planted today that grow value tomorrow. Think about education. Many of the world's highest earning professions require expensive training. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, everything. Architects, they reach success through years of education often paid for by student loans. The loan wasn't an obstacle. Everything. It was the ticket that allowed them to step into a world they couldn't access otherwise. Yes, they have responsibility after graduation. Everything. But they also have a career that pays them exponentially more than what they borrowed. That's leverage. Now picture a person working a basic job, living paycheck to paycheck, everything, feeling stuck and invisible. They've always dreamed of learning coding or digital marketing or project management, but life keeps getting in the way. Bills, responsibilities, everything, unexpected expenses. They think they can't afford education, but the truth is, they can't afford not to learn something new. A small education loan, carefully chosen, everything, might be the very decision that uplifts their entire career and creates room for financial stability. I've seen countless stories of individuals who took a chance on themselves, everything, borrowed just enough to learn a new skill, and within a year completely transformed their earning power. Let's shift to business for a moment. Everything, every thriving business you admire today was once just an idea. But ideas don't grow without capital. Banks, investors, everything, microfinance programs. They exist because the world understands that capital builds progress. If you have a business dream and you've done your research, planned your model, everything, and validated your idea, borrowing with strategy can accelerate everything. Instead of crawling your way forward, you take a meaningful step, everything. Instead of being stuck in the imagined version of your business, you enter the real one. But here's an important truth: borrowing for growth is not about instant success. Everything. It's about long-term value. When you take a growth-focused loan, you're not looking for overnight change. You're looking for transformation over months and years, everything. And that transformation is built on action, not hope. So whenever you consider a loan for opportunity, ask yourself one thing: what specific result will this loan help me create? Everything. If the answer leads toward progress, knowledge, or income, you're empowering yourself, not burdening yourself. This mindset changes your emotional relationship with debt, everything. Instead of feeling guilty, anxious, or ashamed about borrowing, you begin feeling responsible, strategic, and intentional, everything. You're not taking money just to get through this month. You're taking money to build a life where you don't have to struggle every month. That is a powerful shift, everything. That is what separates those who stay stuck from those who rise. There is a quote often shared in business circles: "You can't save your way to wealth, everything. You invest your way to wealth." Saving is essential, of course, but investment accelerates progress. And strategic loans used for growth are one form of investment, everything. They open doors that would take years to reach otherwise. They create opportunities that would have been impossible using only short-term savings. I want you to remember this: everything. Survival thinking keeps you where you are, but investment thinking moves you forward. Every time you borrow money with purpose, everything, you're choosing the future version of yourself instead of the current limitation around you. You're choosing learning over waiting. You're choosing growth over fear. Everything. You're choosing possibilities over hesitation. One day you will look back and realize that the smartest decisions you ever made were not just the ones that kept you safe, everything, but the ones that allowed you to expand, everything. Sometimes the difference between staying small and building something meaningful is simply the willingness to invest in yourself before the world sees your value, everything. There comes a moment in every person's financial journey when they finally step back from the constant noise of daily expenses, bills, loan balances, and future worries, everything, and ask themselves a deeper question: what role do I want money to play in my life? Not what the world expects, not what circumstances force, but what you decide with intention, everything. In this chapter, we are going to walk into that moment consciously, because true financial power doesn't begin when you're wealthy, everything. And it doesn't automatically arrive when your debt is cleared. It begins when you understand yourself, understand money, and begin to operate from clarity rather than reaction, everything. Most people's entire financial identity is built on reacting. They react to emergencies, react to sudden expenses, react to impulsive decisions, react to pressure, react to desires, everything. React to life. Every choice becomes a response instead of a decision. They borrow because something forced them. They pay because they're obligated, everything. They invest only when someone else convinces them. That reactive pattern makes them feel as if their finances are happening to them instead of happening through them, everything. But becoming financially powerful means stepping into the driver's seat, fully awake, aware, and responsible. Now, think about someone you know, maybe a friend, a relative, everything, or someone you've watched from a distance who always seems calm about money. Maybe they're not wealthy. Maybe they still have loans. But their energy around money is different, everything. They're not tense. They're not afraid. They make choices with a sense of clarity. Even when things are uncertain, these people have learned something extremely rare, everything. Financial confidence isn't about your bank balance, it's about your mindset, discipline, and planning. Their power is internal, not external. They have trained themselves to think ahead, everything, act with intention, and design systems that support them instead of waiting for luck or shortcuts. Imagine someone starting a small business using a modest loan, everything. Many people would panic under that pressure. But a financially powerful person uses the loan strategically. They plan revenue, manage cash flow, prepare fallback strategies, everything, and even practice the mindset of responsibility daily. The goal isn't just paying the loan back. It's using the loan to build strength. And here's something important, everything. Financial power doesn't necessarily mean avoiding loans. It means choosing them deliberately. Loans become tools, not traps. They become levers, not limits. Everything. Think about a young student taking a student loan. One student feels overwhelmed and constantly stressed about repayment. Another student approaches it differently, everything. They already know the repayment strategy before graduation. They've researched earning opportunities. They understand timelines. They've rehearsed financial discipline early, everything. When repayment time comes, they are not frightened, they're prepared. That difference didn't come from luck or privilege. It came from mindset and planning, everything. Financial power is built on long-term thinking. It's the ability to look beyond today's numbers and understand the trajectory you are building. Tomorrow always arrives, everything. The question is whether you arrive prepared or surprised. Too many people plan month to month instead of year to year, or even decade to decade, everything. But real freedom begins when you stretch your vision further. If you ask yourself, where do I want to financially be in 5 years? You unlock a new direction. If you ask everything, where do I want loans to fit into that picture? You unlock control. There is a couple I once heard about who lived their early married years constantly struggling with bills, everything. Every month felt like a battle. Eventually, they sat together and had a deep conversation. They made a decision, not to avoid debt, but to understand it, plan it, and master it, everything. They listed every loan, calculated realistic repayment schedules, prioritized what mattered, and built a disciplined system. They still had debt, everything. But their relationship with money changed entirely. Before, debt felt like a monster standing in the room. After, it became just a number they managed with maturity. Over a decade, everything. They built savings, invested slowly, and eventually became debt-free. But here's the real achievement: they didn't just get rid of debt. They became financially powerful. Sometimes, everything financial power means choosing not to borrow at all. Sometimes it means borrowing strategically. Sometimes it means paying faster. Everything. Sometimes it means delaying repayments to preserve cash flow. But the meaning remains the same. You make the decision intentionally. You design the outcome instead of drifting toward it. Everything. Let's bring this closer to your personal reality. Think about your current finances. What role are loans playing in your life right now? Are they tools that serve your goals? Everything. Or are they burdens that control your behavior? Are you making decisions based on pressure or planning? Pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Everything. Because until you understand your present emotional relationship with debt, you cannot shape your future financial identity. Everything. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the habit of forecasting. Every month, everything. Schedule time to sit down, even if just for an hour, and project the next 6 months or 1 year financially. Not just income and expenses, but possible life changes, risks, everything. New opportunities, investments, and savings growth. Something remarkable happens when you start thinking ahead. Your brain automatically starts preparing, adjusting, everything, and strengthening your plans. The more you mentally prepare, the less you fear unexpected challenges. Imagine yourself 10 years into the future. Everything. Visualize a version of you who understands money deeply, who isn't shaken by sudden expenses, who knows how to use loans wisely or avoid them entirely. That person exists. Everything. But that person has to be built, and the construction materials are discipline, awareness, and intention, not luck or shortcuts. Financial power also means learning. Books, courses, everything, financial mentors, advisors. These are not expenses, they are investments. Everything. Many financially struggling people hesitate to educate themselves about money because they fear they won't understand it, or they think only rich people need financial literacy. Everything. But financial literacy is what creates stability before wealth ever arrives. It teaches you the language of money so you're never intimidated by it again. Take a simple example. Everything. A person earns a promotion and their salary increases. Most people increase their lifestyle immediately. New phone, new clothes, upgraded apartment, everything. But a financially powerful person increases their savings rate first. They enlarge their future, not just their present comfort. That mindset is the foundation of power. Another key element, everything. Create financial rules for yourself. For example, only borrow for something that increases earning potential. Or commit a fixed percentage of income to debt repayment. Everything. Or refuse impulsive purchases if they exceed a certain amount without a 24-hour delay. These rules strengthen your discipline and make your decision-making easier. Everything. Because once you create rules, emotions lose their control. You might wonder, how do I become financially powerful if my income is small, my responsibilities are heavy, everything, and my situation feels limited? The answer begins with micro choices. Start by mastering small financial behaviors, just like someone builds physical strength with small weights first. Everything. Small steps create self-respect. Self-respect creates discipline. Discipline builds power, and power transforms your reality. Everything. Now imagine a time in your future when an opportunity arises. A new business idea, a valuable certification, land investment, or a chance to grow your income. In that moment, everything, you will face a decision. Do I borrow? Should I borrow? Can I afford not to borrow? The financially powerful version of you will be able to answer calmly, rationally, everything, and confidently, because you've trained that part of you already. As you continue on this journey, everything. Remember that becoming financially powerful is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice. It is a daily commitment to awareness, long-term thinking, and discipline. Everything. It is a willingness to make responsible decisions even when nobody else is watching. And it is the courage to shape your financial destiny instead of being shaped by it. Everything. You are learning to build a life where debt is never your identity, where money is a partner, not a problem. Everything. And where your financial future is not something you hope for. It's something you design intentionally, patiently, and powerfully.